This right here is the worst case scenario. It's a card game, and it comes in a box like this. How this game works, it's a prompt and response game. So you've got these 5 cards here of, well, less than favorable things, and you've got one person who decides to them personally, what are these values from 5 to 1, 5 being the worst and 1 being, the least worst, and they designate each of those chips to pertaining card. How the other players play is they try to guess what the first player would vote these values. And so what they do is they place these chips in front of the card to correspond their picks, and then they gotta flip them over and move them around and do all sorts of stuff. Well, I thought, what if we had a grid system where we just placed these tokens in, pushed them over, and then had like a flap or something to cover up the value so we didn't need to do a whole bunch of unnecessary flipping, a whole bunch of unnecessary stacking, and things like that. Let's see what I come up with. So I go to my favorite online modeling site, Tinkercad. It's where you can create simple 3D models for simple 3D prints. So I figure out the dimensions of the cards that are going to be in the box, the size of each token, and then just the overall size that I have to work with. The large box there is the overall size of the box, the space inside I got to work with. The 2 smaller rectangles are for the 2 stacks of prompt cards, and then the line of tokens are, well, the tokens. I figured I'd like to have them all in line, because that's how you play the game, and just have something that you can set the tokens in and slide it in front of the cards. When I was messing around with the dimensions, I found that the tokens that come with a box, when set in a straight line, do not really fit going horizontally. So I try this diagonal approach, but if I do that, then the cards won't fit. And yes, I tried rotating the card boxes and the tokens and all that jazz, but unfortunately, it just didn't seem to pan out that way. So I decided, well, if I'm printing everything else, I probably could just print off the tokens too. So I went ahead and redesigned the tokens. First, they were just simple circles with, the numbers 1 through 5. But then I remembered the internet's great nowadays, so I looked up a picture of the tokens. I copied those into a photo software. I then exported those as a file type to import into this modeling here. I think it's called SVG if I recall. And then I just sent those to the diameter that I already had the circles on, slapped that on top, and ta-da, I've got the exact text and curve and all that fun stuff that the base game has, just at a smaller size for what I'm using for. So, when designing the grids, I decided to give each player a simple rectangle that they just slot the tokens into. So I make a rectangle here, and then take the depth of my tokens, depress that into the rectangle, and go, okay, that's how tall it needs to be. And then eventually I will get back around to chamfering a half circle on top of that to make it easy to pull the tokens out and swap around in case you change your mind. Initially here, I'm working on a tongue and groove? Yeah, we're going to call that. It's a groove system. So I create a little lip on that rectangle design I created where the tokens sit in. And then on top of that, I want to have some sort of rectangle that goes inside of that groove and then just slides to cover up the top. That way it's locked in place, and then when you want to reveal them, you just pull out the slide, and there they are. And then when I was working on it, I wanted to give it a bit more than just a simple rectangle, so I give 2 squished down little nubs on the end, so you've got something to grip against when you're pushing or pulling off. And then I figured, well, I can also pull the name of the game and put that on the faceplate as well. So that's what I went ahead and did. And you can see that's the design there. That's what I came up with. And I thought, we're looking pretty good here. Let's send it off to the printer. This was my first print in a while, and you can tell because, it just went wrong. So I did the smart decision and just decided to reprint it exactly as the same file. I didn't change nothing, send it back off to the printer, let's have at it. 4 hours later, I come back to a successful print. Hey, that's pretty great. So, checking it over, I was checking out the dimensions of placing objects into their spots, so the tokens going into the grid and things like that. And I found that whenever you have modeling, especially for 3D printers, because you got a lot of variance, if you make the part that goes into the hole a little smaller than the overall size of the hole, it comes out better and easier. So I found that the tokens sit perfectly. It's exactly what I want, but as I mentioned, I forgot to create some sort of lip this first time around, which I do address later on. So the tokens couldn't come out. And I found that the groove that I had and the slide that goes on top of it was just simply too tight for it to actually go through. I didn't make that variance or gap large enough. I didn't take that much difference into account. And then just also that whole, unit just wouldn't fit into the spot where it's supposed to go in that overall box case. So I had to go back and fix some, what's the word I'm looking for? Measurements. We're going to go with measurements. So I go back into Tinkercad, adjust some values again, increase the gaps between my pieces and if it slots into it, things like that. Add my depth and just add an overall space that's open so you can pick the tokens up and move them about. And well, I sent that off to the printer too. Another 4 hours and another successful print. Sweet! Except it doesn't really work great again. The slide is still too thin and it doesn't fit through the holder the best, and the supports kind of make the cleanup a little pain in the butt. And just kind of reevaluating what I need to do here. I just need something that covers the top. So I thought about a hinge, figured that'd be obstructive, thought about redoing the little slide, and then I just thought, well, what if I just put like some grooves up top, let that plate rest on top of there, and call it a day, and that would work plenty. So that's what I did, redesigned, sent it off again. Now the only other thing that I did was I went back, I decreased the vertical size of the grid, so that way I can flip it vertically and store it in the box, make it easier to get out, because I've got 6 of them, right? The only thing is now, because that slide does not sit and keep that whole assembly secure, I'm worried that the tokens are going to fall out when they're all stored together like that. And, well, let's see how that works. And, ta-da! Here it is. Works pretty good. Cards go here, pencil goes here, things go in here. Might have to increase this space just to put more of them in. But, yeah. That works pretty good. Quick note, I went back and removed those curves and just added a wall and let this sit in on top of it because that's a lot simpler and I was over engineering things. Now you might have noticed something. I've been showing you pictures and talking about how the game is supposed to be playing, where I could simply maybe just pull it out and show it to you and give you a description that way. Well, the thing is, I don't actually own the game. So then you might be asking yourself, why is he designing a grid system for a game that he doesn't own? And that's a simple answer, really. You see...